5 a.m. February 11th, 2026, Marietta, Georgia. A black armored vehicle blocked the entrance to Peachtree Animal Care on Roswell Road. 16 DEA agents in tactical gear moved toward the front doors. A battering ram hit the glass. The alarm triggered. Simultaneously, across Georgia and Alabama, 18 other veterinary clinics received the same visit. 340 federal agents, 19 locations, one coordinated strike. Inside the Marietta Clinic, agents found what they expected in the front: exam rooms, kennels, surgical suites, standard veterinary practice. But behind a locked storage room on the second floor, they found what 10 months of wiretaps had promised: 43 unmarked vials of pharmaceutical-grade ketamine, a vacuum sealer, shipping labels addressed to 6 different nightclubs, and a laptop with an encrypted spreadsheet tracking deliveries going back 14 months. The clinic's founder, Dr. Nathan Hargrove, was not at the front entrance. He had already moved through the kennel area toward a rear exit that opened onto a staff parking lot. A K-9 unit was waiting. Hargrove made it 11 feet past the door before a Belgian Malinois took him to the ground. He was cuffed on the asphalt at 5:04 a.m., still wearing surgical scrubs. This is the story of how a respected veterinarian built a $67 million ketamine pipeline hidden inside a chain of animal hospitals, and how a single overdose victim in Atlanta exposed the entire operation. The investigation started 5 months earlier, September 14, 2025, Grady Memorial Hospital, Atlanta. A 24-year-old woman was brought into the emergency department at 1:23 a.m. cardiac arrest. Toxicology came back with ketamine levels 4 times above recreational dosing thresholds. She survived. But the attending physician flagged something unusual in his report. The ketamine in her system was 99.4% pure. Street ketamine typically tests between 40 and 70% purity. Pharmaceutical-grade ketamine, the kind used in veterinary surgery and licensed medical clinics, runs between 98 and 99.5%. The number in that toxicology report meant one thing: the drug had not been cooked in a basement lab or cut through a chain of middlemen. It had come directly from a licensed supply chain. The case landed on the desk of DEA Special Agent Renee Vasquez at the Atlanta field office. Vasquez had spent 6 years working pharmaceutical diversion cases. She requested the batch analysis from the DEA Southeast Laboratory in Miami. The results came back on October 3, 2025. The ketamine matched a chemical signature linked to PharmVet Solutions, a licensed veterinary pharmaceutical distributor based in Decatur, Georgia. PharmVet supplied ketamine hydrochloride to veterinary practices across the Southeast. Their client list included over 200 clinics. Vasquez pulled PharmVet's distribution records for the previous 12 months. One name appeared repeatedly: Hargrove Veterinary Group. 19 locations across Georgia and Alabama. In the past year, the chain had ordered 2,200 pounds of ketamine. For context, a busy veterinary surgical practice uses between 30 and 60 pounds per year. 19 clinics, even high-volume ones, might use 800 pounds combined. Hargrove Veterinary Group had ordered nearly 3 times that amount. Dr. Nathan Hargrove had founded the chain in 2017. He started with a single clinic in Kennesaw, Georgia. By 2022, he operated 7 locations. By 2025, 19. He had a reputation in the Georgia veterinary community as an aggressive but competent businessman. He served on the Georgia State Veterinary Board's advisory committee. He spoke at conferences. He donated to animal rescue charities. His clinics were real. They treated real animals. They employed licensed veterinarians and veterinary technicians. On paper, every location appeared legitimate, but Vasquez noticed a pattern in the purchasing records. Every Hargrove clinic ordered roughly the same amount of ketamine each quarter, regardless of patient volume. A small-town Alabama location with 40 appointments per week ordered the same quantity as a high-traffic Atlanta suburb clinic with 300. That uniformity was the first anomaly. The second anomaly was the mortality reports. Federal and state regulations require veterinary practices to report animal deaths involving controlled substances. Hargrove's clinics reported animal mortality rates 280% above the state average. According to his records, an extraordinary number of animals were dying during procedures that required ketamine, and the drugs used in those procedures had to be disposed of through licensed pharmaceutical waste companies. 280%. The Georgia state average for surgical mortality in veterinary practice sat between 0.5 and 1.2%. Hargrove's clinics were reporting rates between 3 and 4%. Either his veterinarians were dangerously incompetent, or the animals weren't dying at all. On October 19, 2025, Vasquez obtained authorization for Title III wiretaps on 14 phone lines connected to Hargrove and his senior staff. The wiretaps would run for 7 months. Within the first 3 weeks, the picture became clear. Hargrove had built what the DEA would later call a ghost inventory system. It worked like this. Each clinic placed legitimate ketamine orders through Farm Vet Solutions. The drugs arrived through normal pharmaceutical distribution channels, signed for by licensed staff. Then Hargrove's operations manager, a man named Cole Bridger, would visit each location on a rotating schedule. Bridger would remove between 30 and 50% of the ketamine inventory, replace it with saline solution in identical vials, and transport the genuine product to a storage unit in Stockbridge, Georgia. The falsified mortality reports covered the gap. If a clinic ordered 100 vials and used 40 for legitimate procedures, the remaining 60 were accounted for as drugs administered to animals that subsequently died. The Pharmaceutical Waste Disposal Company, which was also controlled by Hargrove through a shell LLC, would issue destruction certificates for ketamine that never existed in those vials. The wiretaps captured Bridger coordinating pickups and deliveries across all 19 locations. They captured Hargrove discussing orders with Farm Vet, and they captured something Vasquez hadn't expected: conversations between Hargrove and a network of nightclub promoters across 4 states. The distribution side operated through 7 individuals who worked as promoters at clubs in Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, Charlotte, and Jacksonville. Each promoter received shipments of repackaged ketamine in unmarked vials, typically 20 to 40 vials at a time, delivered by courier. The promoters sold directly to club patrons and to smaller-scale dealers within the nightlife circuit. If you're watching this and finding value in this investigation, hit that subscribe button. We break down federal operations like this every week, and the next case is already in production. Wiretap intercepts from November 2025 revealed the pricing structure. Hargrove purchased pharmaceutical-grade ketamine from Farm Vet at roughly $8 per gram. After diversion and repackaging, the same ketamine sold to promoters at $35 per gram. The promoters moved it to end users at $80 to $120 per gram, depending on the city. At 2,200 pounds diverted over 14 months, the pipeline's gross revenue at the promoter level exceeded $67 million. The money moved through a layered system. Promoters paid in cash, which was collected by Bridger on a bi-weekly route. Bridger deposited the cash in amounts under $10,000 across 23 bank accounts held under various LLCs. From there, the funds were transferred to 3 accounts in the Cayman Islands, then repatriated as business loans to Hargrove Veterinary Group. The clinics, in other words, were funded by the drug money they helped generate. A closed loop. By December 2025, Vasquez had enough to bring the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia. But the investigation had surfaced a complication. One of the 14 wiretapped phones belonged to a man named Dale Kirkner. Kirkner was a Georgia state drug inspector, the official responsible for auditing controlled substance records at veterinary practices statewide. His job was to verify that clinics like Hargrove's were ordering, using, and disposing of scheduled drugs according to federal and state law. Kirkner had been signing off on Hargrove's audits for over 2 years. Every quarterly inspection came back clean. No discrepancies noted. The wiretaps told a different story. In a call recorded on November 8, 2025, Hargrove told Bridger, "Kirkner's taken care of, same as last quarter, 15. DEA analysts interpreted 15 as $15,000, the monthly payment Kirkner received for falsifying audit reports. In a separate call on December 2nd, Kirkner himself was recorded telling Hargrove, "I can push the next audit to February. That gives you a window." A state drug inspector actively participating in the cover-up changed the scope of the case. Vasquez brought in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Georgia State Police. The investigation was now multi-agency. Between January and February 2026, the team built the operational plan for simultaneous raids on all 19 Hargrove locations. The logistics required coordination between DEA, Georgia State Police, Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, and local sheriff's departments in 11 counties. Simultaneously, Vasquez's team continued monitoring the wiretaps. In January, the intercepts revealed 2 additional targets, Dr. Lena Marcos and Dr. Paul Yun, both licensed pharmacists who worked at Farm Vet Solutions. Marcos and Yun had been flagging Hargrove's oversized orders internally, but approving them anyway. A recorded conversation between Marcos and Yun on January 15, 2026, included the line, He's ordering enough to sedate every horse in Georgia, but the check clears, so both pharmacists knew the orders were abnormal. They processed them anyway. The raid was scheduled for February 11, 2026. Operational briefings began 3 days prior at the DEA Atlanta field office. Each of the 19 locations was assigned a strike team of 14 to 20 agents. K-9 units were deployed to locations where suspects were deemed flight risks, including the Marietta headquarters, where Hargrove typically arrived before 6 a.m. February 11th. 4:45 a.m., all teams reported in position. At exactly 5 a.m., breach orders were given across all locations simultaneously. The coordination was precise. No location could receive a warning call from another. Cell phone jammers were activated around each site at 4:58 a.m. At the Marietta headquarters, the entry team breached the front doors and cleared the ground floor in under 90 seconds. 14 employees were present, night shift veterinary technicians and cleaning staff. All were detained without resistance. Hargrove was located on the second floor. He heard the breach and moved immediately toward the rear kennel exit. Surveillance cameras later showed him dropping a cell phone into a trash bin as he walked, a phone that was not among the 14 monitored lines. When agents recovered it, the phone contained an encrypted messaging app with conversations referencing a 19th distribution contact that had not appeared in any wiretap. After the K-9 unit stopped Hargrove in the parking lot, agents conducted a search of his vehicle. Inside the trunk, $83,000 in cash, a go bag containing a passport, and a one-way ticket to Costa Rica departing that afternoon from Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Hargrove had known the raid was coming, or at least he had suspected it. Across the other 18 locations, the raids proceeded with fewer complications. At the Birmingham, Alabama clinic, agents found a hidden room behind a supply closet containing a repackaging operation, a table, a vacuum sealer, 200 blank vial labels, and 67 vials of diverted ketamine ready for shipment. At the Savannah location, a veterinary technician attempted to flush vials down a toilet. Agents recovered fragments and residue sufficient for lab analysis. In total, the February 11th raids produced the following: 31 arrests across all locations, seizure of 187 vials of diverted ketamine, seizure of $1.4 million in cash found across 8 locations, seizure of financial records documenting transactions going back to March 2024, recovery of the Stockbridge storage unit, which contained an additional 340 vials and packaging equipment. Drop a comment below, yes, right, should veterinary drug oversight be federalized? The gap in the state-level enforcement is the reason this pipeline existed for as long as it did. The arrests included Hargrove, Bridger, 5 clinic managers who had participated in the inventory manipulation, 7 nightclub promoters, 2 farm vet pharmacists, and Dale Kirkner. Kirkner was arrested at his home in Lawrenceville, Georgia. At 5:15 a.m., agents found $47,000 in cash in a safe in his garage, along with falsified audit documents dating back to early 2024. The indictments were unsealed on February 14, 2026. The U.S. Attorney charged 31 defendants under a single conspiracy indictment. The charges included conspiracy to distribute a Schedule III controlled substance, money laundering, wire fraud, and, for Kirkner, bribery of a public official and obstruction of justice. Hargrove faced the most severe charges: continuing criminal enterprise, a designation typically reserved for drug kingpins, which carries a mandatory minimum of 20 years. The case proceeded quickly. Between February and March 2026, 14 of the 31 defendants entered plea agreements. Most of the nightclub promoters accepted deals in exchange for testimony against Hargrove and Bridger. 2 clinic managers cooperated as well, but the investigation was not complete. The encrypted phone recovered from Hargrove's trash bin led to a 19th distribution contact, a man identified only as Ray in the encrypted messages. As of March 2026, Ray had not been identified or located. The messages suggested Ray operated in the Miami market and received shipments larger than any of the other 7 promoters. Additionally, the DEA's financial forensics team traced only $23 million of the estimated $67 million in pipeline revenue. The Cayman Islands accounts held $11.2 million at the time of seizure. The remaining $44 million, roughly 2/3 of the total, had been moved through channels that investigators were still trying to trace. The farm vet connection raised its own questions. Marcos and Yoon were charged, but the company's owner, a man named Gerald Fontaine, was not indicted. Fontaine claimed no knowledge of the diversion scheme. DEA investigators were skeptical, but could not find evidence linking him directly to the conspiracy on the wiretaps. Fontaine retained his pharmaceutical distribution license. The Hargrove case exposed a structural vulnerability in veterinary pharmaceutical oversight. Unlike human pharmacies, which are subject to federal DEA audits and state board inspections on overlapping schedules, veterinary practices in most states are audited solely by state drug inspectors. In Georgia, one inspector, Kirkner, was responsible for overseeing controlled substance compliance at more than 400 veterinary practices across 60 counties. One person, 400 clinics. The math made corruption almost inevitable. In a press conference on February 15, 2026, DEA Administrator Ann Milgram called the veterinary pharmaceutical supply chain a nationwide vulnerability that criminal networks are only beginning to exploit. She announced the creation of a DEA task force specifically focused on veterinary drug diversion, the first of its kind. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed an executive order on February 20th, restructuring the state's drug inspection program. The number of inspectors was increased from 3 to 12, audit cycles were shortened from annual to quarterly, but enforcement advocates noted that these changes addressed Georgia only. 41 other states maintained the same single inspector model that had allowed Hargrove's operation to flourish. Hargrove's trial was scheduled for June 2026. As of early April, he had rejected all plea offers. His defense attorney filed motions challenging the wiretap authorizations and the admissibility of the encrypted phone evidence. Bridger pleaded guilty on March 12, 2026, and agreed to cooperate fully. His testimony was expected to be the cornerstone of the government's case. Kirkner also pleaded guilty on March 19th. He was facing up to 15 years. His cooperation agreement included providing testimony about how the state inspection system could be manipulated, testimony that Georgia legislators requested access to for use in drafting new oversight legislation. The 24-year-old woman, whose overdose triggered the investigation, survived and was released from Grady Memorial in September 2025. Her name was never made public. If this case held your attention, hit the like button. It tells us to keep going deeper on these investigations. As of April 2026, 17 of the 19 Hargrove Clinic locations have been shut down permanently. 2 were purchased by independent veterinarians and continue operating under new ownership. The animals that were patients at these clinics were relocated to other practices. Why? A process that took nearly 2 months and involved coordination with 3 animal welfare organizations. The DEA's Task Force on Veterinary Diversion opened investigations in 4 additional states within its first month of operation. Details of those cases remain sealed. The man known as Ray has not been found. The $44 million has not been recovered. And the question the DEA posed in its February press conference, how many other veterinary supply chains are being exploited right now, does not yet have an answer. The pipeline is shut down. The infrastructure that allowed it to exist is still in place in most of the country.